All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Urban Ag Hour. We're so excited that you were able to join us this morning and hear from an amazing speaker today. The Urban Agriculture Production Small Scale and Beginning Farmer Program is partnered with USDA, NRCS, and FSA to offer this series. And today we will hear from Blue Sky Organic Farms Farm Manager, Sara Dolan. I will now hand it over to you, Sara, and you can take it away from here.
Alrighty, hi everyone, and welcome to the Urban Ag Hour. I um I am a farm manager, and here we have a lot of things going on. So we do a lot of things, but one of the biggest things we do is food safety. We're huge proponents of a small farm on farm food safety, and it can look different for everybody on depending on what you do. And I guess what I want everybody to take away from this is it's a lot of information, but once you pare it down, it's really just a few documents that you keep, and it's really for your own protection, as well as anybody else's protection from illness that might originate on a farm, but also for your protection as a business owner. So let's go through a little bit of like what food safety means, and how can you get certified, and what certifications do we have. We're going to talk about trainings and key practices, things like that. So one of the big ones right now that people talk about is FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act. So it's a set of science-based standards for growing, harvesting, packing, even holding produce. And there's a lot of key rules in it, but a lot of it is about preventative controls, sanitation, produce safety, transportation protocols, and how that works. I mean, it is a government document that you file, that you have to file with to get certified and get inspected. But it also, one of the biggest parts of it is water testing and microbial testing. So fortunately, here in Arizona, we have a fantastic set of trainers here. You can go take the class. A lot of them are virtual, or you can do some in-person ones, English and Spanish. And they'll help you write the plan. They'll come do a mock audit of your farm. And it's really helpful to go through the whole process and get registered as a farm. And so I recommend that everybody does that. So, but the other part I want to talk about is GAP. And so that's the USDA Good Agricultural Practices and Good Handling Practices. So GIP-GAP. I don't like to say it like that, so I just say GAP. But and then there's actually harmonized GAP, which you can do in a group, and GAP Plus, which is what we do. So we do HGAP Plus, which means that we belong to a group. Our group is actually out of Hawaii, but we're a bunch of small farms here in Arizona that can get together. So we share the cost of bringing an auditor in and doing, so if we all, do it within like 3 or 4 days, we split his travel costs and all of that would bring him here, because there's not usually a lot of auditors here for that. And sorry, I have a fly in the office. And it just makes it a little more economical. And we can work together as a group as well to talk about like what our challenges are. And it really gives you some extra people to bounce questions off of and thoughts, and because you're not alone. And I think a lot of times as farmers, you feel very isolated, especially when you get to this point in your farming career. And so it's nice to actually have a group that you can rely on. So I have found it to be incredibly beneficial. And the HGAP Plus program through the USDA is on par with what a lot of the bigger farms use, which is called global gap. So even though it's not global gap, it's almost always accepted as global gap. So if you ever wanted to do something out of state or a little more fancy with grocery stores or bigger packers or vendors, then this would be something that you can get into. And as a group, they're going to help you walk through it. It's never been adversarial. It's always been supportive, from the auditors to the people who help you write the programs, and even people who help you like develop your documents. So anyway, it works. It's one of the better farming systems that I have been a part of in a group. So anyway, so with that, it's always also important to know that you write your own farm food safety policy based on your farm, not based on anybody else's farm. So what I do here for Blue Sky can be completely different than what Acme Farming or, another farm on the same street next door to me could be. So it's really all based on what you do and your farm. So you write your program. In Arizona, through the Arizona Department of Ag, there's actually an employee out there who comes and helps you write your program, which is it's a free program. I think it's Paris Masick, yeah, that comes out now and will help you write your entire program and then help you get audited through either Arizona Department of Ag for GAP, or you can go with a harmonized GAP plan, more like what we do. So anybody tell me if I'm talking too fast or if you want me to cover something else. And I guess I should read some notes.
You're doing great.
Okay. So what we do here is, one, you have to write your plan. You have to write the document. And there are a million resources out there now on the internet that can help you come up with your plan. You do not have to do it all on your own. But I will tell you, one of the very best ways is to go to the USDA. If you're going to, I'm going to base all of this as you're probably going to use the GAP or HGAP, but you can go to the GAP website and you can search for the actual audit that the auditor is going to come in with in his 3-ring notebook and judge everything you do by. And so you can look at that actual audit, which is totally amazing to me. It's like an open book test, right? And you can find out if you need to have a written policy, if it's something, if it's an observation that the auditor needs to see, if it's a conversation he needs to have with a worker, if it's a training document you need to provide from the past, if it's whatever it is, it's going to tell you in this document exactly what they're looking for. And so I have always found, and I was told this by an ex-auditor one time, that if you take that and just break it down and write your farm safety program right in line with this, I mean, not word for word, and you always have to back it up by what your actions are, because that's really what they're going to look at in the end, is what are your actions. But one, it will help you go through the audit a whole lot easier and smoother if your document and their document sort of flow together. And so you're not spending a lot of time going back and forth, flipping pages and looking at things. And having your documents, knowing, I have to have my compost records. I have to have my training records. I have to have, all my signs. These are my signs that I put up. These, here's my harvest records. Here's my water test records. Here's, my glove policy, if I have one or if I don't have one. And you may not have, just as a, for instance, you may not have a glove policy on your farm, but you need to have something in your document that says, I don't have a glove policy. And then right there, that is actually your glove policy. I don't have a glove policy, can be your glove policy. So I really urge you to go online and look at systems that University of Pennsylvania has put out, or there's a lot from Michigan or Wisconsin, or, beginning farmer groups. A lot of times will have documents that you can look at to reference and help you write your own. So it's really, you don't have to create the wheel here, use somebody else's wheel, just throw your spokes in there. And okay, now I have to go back to my notes. Sorry, guys. So one of the things, let's talk about food safety with your workers, because one of the things you're going to want to do is at least annually. I do it biannually, so every 6 months in this biannual case. I go through an entire food safety training with my employees. And, I don't necessarily do it every year for people that are in my office, but definitely anybody who's going to touch produce, especially on a daily basis. And we're going to talk about washing your hands. We're going to talk about what happens when food falls on the floor. We're going to talk about when you're sick and what your protocols are. We're going to talk about, you can't wear clothes with rhinestones on them. And, if you're in processing and wash water, or maybe not wash water, but you can't wear earbuds because earbuds can fall out and get lost and be in somebody's food. And nobody wants to open a package of food and have somebody's gross earbud in there, right? So you have to look at a lot of these things. And when you're writing your training documents for any part of your farm, you have to understand that this can change. And that's fine. Like what I do right now isn't what I did 10 years ago. And it's probably not what I'm going to do next year. I mean, I'm going to revisit this document and revise it. And I'm going to track my revisions. And that's key, is that it's a system, and systems don't always stay the same. Systems ebb and flow. So I guess one of the biggest things I want you to take away from this is it is a very scary topic to a lot of people, especially beginning farmers who are like, oh my God, I just want to grow food and feed people, which is the most noble profession you can have, right? And now I have to do all of these other things. But the reason that you want to grow food and feed people and nourish people is because you want to help, and you certainly don't want to make them sick from it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of ways that people can get sick from food. And so you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. You want to talk to your employees about every time you leave the restroom, you have to wash your hands with soap and water, and teach them how to wash their hands. You want to talk about, don't get your phone out, use your phone after you've coughed on it, put your phone back in your pocket, and then go back to work. I mean, there's going to be some slip ups and moderation, but you definitely want to train your employees to be the very best and most conscious that you can. You want to talk about, hey, if somebody has a stomach bug and they really don't feel good, they probably shouldn't be harvesting product today. And they should be doing something else on the farm. I mean, there's plenty of other things. So in our case, they can go and work in paperwork, or they can do inventory, or maybe they can do something, with the animals, or they don't have to touch the final product that's going out to the customers. I guess that's what I want to say. So, and so you want to keep all of those training records. You want to talk about, you're going to attach what you trained. You're going to have everybody sign it and date it. And you're going to keep all of your records, all of your food safety records, for at least 2 years, sometimes up to 5. And you want to, you want to have backup of all that. And that's true for any of your SOPs or your maps, any record keeping that you do, any temperature tracking that you do. You always want to keep everything for at least 2 years. Part of what you're going to do on a farm food safety plan is you're going to assess risks, water, water risks. You're going to talk about worker hygiene, post-harvest handling, packaging materials, animals, land uses around you. You're going to talk about, think about food defense policies. You're going to want to have an idea, like, what if you had to do a recall? Sorry, Addie, no. If you had to do a recall, how would you do that? How would you execute a recall and do a mock recall? You have to have that in your file. And it doesn't, so you want to look at what that means, and just in case, be prepared for the worst case scenario, because it could happen. It could happen. But if you're well prepared, then you know exactly the steps you need to take in a very short amount of time. You have a point of reference to go back to, and you want to be able to talk about, this is who, I'm going to do this. I'm going to contact these customers because I know they bought this product, and I'm going to tell them to destroy the product, and they're going to need to give me proof that they destroyed it. Or I'm going to go pick up the product, or they're going to have to notify, if they already sold the product, whoever they sold it to. And then it becomes on them. They were notified and they have to follow up and take the next step. So you want to talk about all of that and look at all of that. So you're going to assess a whole bunch of things that could go wrong. You're going to talk about, what if I get a flood? What if I find a dead bird in my crops? What if what's going to happen if I have washed a bunch of bunched greens and I drop the tote on the ground, and now what do I do with them? Can I resell them? Do I have to wash them again? I mean, you're going to have to assess all these risks. Is my food safe? Can anybody else get into it? And then I always suggest to people, like, you temperature check everything. So if you're going to, for instance, any truck or person that picks up any product here at Blue Sky, we have a thermometer, and we check the inside of their vehicle for what temperature it is, because a lot of what we sell here is very temperature sensitive. So if I'm putting a case of salad mix on somebody's truck and their truck is 46 degrees, but I keep my cooler at 35 degrees, and they're going to go from, their truck has to be between 34 and 37 degrees before I'll load it, because ultimately, if something happens, they're going to come back and say, hey, your product went bad. And I'm going to be like, well, hey, remember we talked about it. But if I have proof and they signed off on it when they picked up that their truck was 46 degrees, then that's on them and not on me. You have to do this not to also protect yourself in these situations. And so, any questions? I feel like I'm just rambling on right now.
Yeah, I have a question. I know you touched on like the recall process, but can you kind of talk more on like if you've ever had to deal with something about that, and then, or if you haven't, if you had to deal with something like a recall process, how would you navigate it?
So about 8, 9 years ago, we did have a recall. Thankfully, it was by mistake, but we thought we had some contamination in some cilantro from water that had gotten onto the farm. And so we did a recall. And then we learned, like, 48 hours later, that, and fortunately, we hadn't sold much cilantro in that time frame. But then we found out later that the lab who had actually tested it had messed up our sample. And so we didn't have a contamination, but we had gone through the process and done the recall. So what you do is, because you are required to track everything by lot numbers, and lot numbers can be easy. I mean, you can, as long as you can trace it back, there's no set system that says you have to do it one way or another. So find a system that works for you. I mean, everybody's different. I use harvest impact date as mine, and I just keep a record of it. But on every invoice that I send anything out, that harvest number, lot code is attached to everything, for us, whether it goes to the farmer's market, whether it goes to Sprouts, whether it goes to, a different distributor. Every piece of food that leaves here that we grew has some sort of lot code attached to it, so we can trace it back. And that lot code stays with it. We can trace it all the way back to planting, but we can trace it all the way forward to who we sold it to as well. And, I'm not saying everybody needs to have a software system like we do that does this, but so use whatever works for you. If you want to use pen and paper and you're just really good at keeping files, then go for it, do it that way. But what we have to do is, for a mock recall, we have to, like, for instance, if we were going to recall carrots, we would have to pick a lot of carrots, and then we would have to be able to trace back everyone we sold those carrots to. And we would have to be able to show that we've contacted them, because we have to go one step forward. So that's contacting everybody you sold those carrots to. And you have to give them a way to prove that they have done something. So if you're asking them to destroy anything that they still have in stock, then you ask for photos of them throwing them away. Or you tell them they have to contact as many people as they possibly can that bought carrots from them if they're a distributor. And then you have to show that you have traced it back to where it came from and what the problem is. So that's really about the record keeping portion of it. I am sure that there's way more to it. Like if it was an E. coli or something like that, listeria, I'm sure that there's way more into it. But at that point, if that was a true outbreak and you were affecting thousands of people, there would be some government assistance in helping you work through all of that. But that is really a test of your record keeping system. The mock recall is really, they're testing, do you know what you're doing, where your product is going and what you're going to do with it after you've sold it. So does that answer your question?
Yes. And then follow-up question, do you use the same process for either like going to farmers markets and like your farm store that you have on the farm, or is there like a separate process that you have for tracking who's bought what from your stores?
No. So for us, we have a software system that tracks, that we assign lot codes in the field when it gets harvested. And that lot code follows it all the way through, whether it comes to the cooler and goes to a distributor, if it goes to the farmer's market, if it goes in a CSA, the store, or whether we're selling it to a restaurant. I mean, for us, that system is all the same. So once the lot code is generated from the field level and gets put into the system, it follows it everywhere it goes. And I know a lot of people aren't going to do that, but for me, in my brain, that works best. And for us, I mean, we're going to talk about small farms. If you're an acre and all you do is harvest for markets, you probably could get an exemption from FSMA and GAP and you would have to show your exemption. And there are some specific requirements for having an exemption. And so I encourage everybody to talk to your Department of Ag to find that out. It's based on how much money do you make off all of your product every year, and who do you sell to, things like that. But for us, we have a greater base of who we sell to and varieties of places we sell, and we're over the threshold that makes us eligible for exemptions. So we have to track everything for them, for FSMA, and we do it for GAP too. So, and it just makes it better. A lot of times, like even your customers want to know what they're buying is safe. If you're going to buy from the food bank, or you're going to sell to the food bank, or into the school systems, or into, some distributors, you have to have a food safety program and you have to have that certificate and you have to keep it up. And some places won't accept anything without a lot code. So it's become, especially over the last 5 or 6 years, it's really become unavoidable if you want to have a true business. If you just want to be the backyard grower and I'm just going to go sell some stuff every once in a while at the market, probably not. I would still encourage you to keep records though, because you never know. You absolutely never know. So yes, we track everything. And we even track it. So if because we're a zero waste farm, so even if I have product that doesn't sell or it came out of the field and we're going to feed it to the animals, I even track it on that level to where did it go? Like if I didn't sell it, where did it end up? Did it end up in compost? Did we just turn it back in? Or did we feed it to an animal? Did we send it to the food bank as a donation? Did we give it to somebody else as a donation? Like where does everything out of that lot end up? And it becomes a system, like at first we were like, oh, this is very overwhelming, but now it's, 15, 20 minutes a day. And in the grand scheme of things, for the volume of produce we put out, it's really not that bad. Reading and keeping up on all of the changes to food safety every year, that is my biggest challenge by far here on the farm, is trying to understand everything because I don't honestly read the regulations every day or week or even a month. So, it's nice to be able to have, like I said, that relationship with a farming group or an auditor or somebody else in food safety to say, who works in it every day, saying, okay, so what are the regulation changes this year? Did some threshold on water contamination change? Do I have to, a couple of years ago, it was like, you have to have all of this stuff as a footer on your documents for FSMA. And, if you had it at the top of the paper instead of the bottom of the paper, it wasn't good. Or for a while there, managers could just initial papers once they saw them or records. And now they have to fully sign it off and date it. So sometimes it's just little stuff, but you got to be aware. And you're always there's going to always be something, but you just don't want it to be one of the big things. If it's like my paperwork wasn't, dated every day, only dated like 5 or 6 times a month, then I'm willing to be like, okay. But, if your water contamination threshold changes, and you need to know about that. So if they change it from, you have to test every month to you have to test every 2 weeks, which they don't. But, if you were used to be allowed to say, I'm going to test my water for total contamination periodically, and now it's like you have to test well water monthly or drinking water monthly, and you have to test irrigation water at whatever regulated time frame. You want to know if there's a change in that. And FSMA is famous for changing things all the time. I mean, it's a fairly new government program, but they love to change it. Love to change it. GAP changes a little bit, but not nearly as much.
When FSMA and GAP do any changes, do you get notified of these changes, or is that something that you have to consistently be researching?
No, there's like listservs and things that you can subscribe to be told, but nobody's going to make that phone call and say, hey, Sarah, guess what changed at FSMA today? Nobody's doing that. So it's easy to overlook that kind of stuff. For me, it's really important that I do it probably quarterly. And so I have it as a calendar reminder to go in and do search. Fortunately, AI is really helpful for all of that now. It used to be really difficult before to have to search the documents and go and find a revised date. Every government document, though, has a date revision posted on it. So you can go and find out, hey, did this change in the last 3 months? Did it change in the last year? Whatever. So, but it's a whole lot easier to type into ChatGPT. Please give me, the latest FSMA changes for X, Y, and Z in the last 6 months or 3 months or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And don't always rely on ChatGPT or AI of any sort, but I'm not gonna lie, it's super helpful in this instance. It's also helpful in helping you design your records. And, if you say to it, like, I want to keep my records in a Google Drive, can you create this? And this is what I need, use it. As a farmer, you do everything so laboriously out in the field, this kind of stuff. Use all of the tools necessary to make this the easiest part of your job, because battling nature and growing things is always should be the hardest.
Perfect. When you kind of got started into like the record keeping and the business side of the farming, how did you manage that and what kind of tools before AI did you use to make it easier on you?
So I have always used Excel. Excel was my best friend for 20 years when it came to things like this. It was amazing. And I know some people, would prefer another form of it. I can use Google Sheets now. We do use Google Sheets. It's not my preferred, I'll always, Excel will be my first love when it comes to anything like that. But that's it. I mean, just have a database and, Google Drive, or have something that's easily accessible. Even Apple Notes. I mean, if you want to do it on your phone, just keep it in Apple Notes. As long as it's a record. If you want to keep pen and paper, keep pen and paper, keep notebooks. I mean, whatever works for you. If you want to have pre-print a calendar up and put it over your sink so that you can check off and put a time every time you wash your hands, do that. If you want to, keep all your records in your truck so that every time you get into the truck at the end of the day, you can record, what you did, what you planted, anything, your compost records, there is not a one size fits all set here. I mean, this is be creative, whatever makes it easiest for you is what I want people to know. And I don't mean easiest like cutting corners. I mean, easiest getting the job done in a way that is traceable. So I know people who just keep a notebook right literally beside their hand washing station, in their back shed, and that's all they do. They just have calendars and they write on it, okay, we harvested these things today. And, the date is their lot code, and that's how they trace it back. And they handwrite their receipts for their customers, or they just write a farmer's market list. And that's what they have taken to market. It's just a handwritten list, but it's a record. I mean, it's a record in itself. It's a record. And that's what you need. So everybody's different, but there's a lot of ways. And, if you want to get fancy and have computerized records and databases, go for it, because I love that kind of stuff. Like I love systems and having it all in one place. Use Notion, use Motion, use Evernote. I mean, there's 1,000 different software partners out there that would love to help you create this. And like I said, there's all these templates are free that you can modify from many, many sources out there. So I think that, you don't have to create them all yourself ever. You probably don't have to create any yourself ever. So
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Another question I have is, what is your protocol for when you spot any animal feces in the field? Like how do you deal with that? Do you throw that food away? Do you wash? Is there like a certain washing procedure for it? How is that something that you manage to ensure that it's safe to sell?
Well, there's a couple of things here is one, if it's like coyote feces is going to be different than bird feces, right? Which is kind of strange to say, but if there's ever any visible contamination, our policy is you have to create a 10-foot barrier and you have to throw away anything within 10 feet of that. So we literally go in and clear cut 10 feet away from everything, and we do not harvest it. We can compost it, but we don't harvest it for food. And, but also the majority of our food comes back to the processing shed here and goes through a kill step, which is it gets washed with water that has peracetic acid in it. So peracetic acid is one of the chemicals that you can use. So basically it's fancy hydrogen peroxide, but it's one of the things that we can use in both organic production and that satisfies all of our food safety needs. So if it's a bunch green, it's coming back and it's going to go through that kill step and that wash step. So it is, and then it's packed in brand new liners and shipped out to wherever it goes. So for us, there's a twofold method there is we're going to get rid of anything. And then we're also going to put everything in through a kill step anyway. So.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anything else? Anybody else?
Yeah, I had a question for you, Sarah. So you mentioned compost applications. Do you test any compost or amendments before putting that on your field? And what does your composting protocol look like in terms of food safety?
So yes, we have to test. We actually are very nutty about testing things. So for instance, every batch of salad that comes out of our field, we test we keep raw product and then we keep finished product, which means after it's been triple washed in the processing room. And then we send that out to an accredited lab and we get it tested for total coliforms, E. coli, salmonella, and listeria. And so we test every batch of ready to eat product for those four things. And then we also keep the raw product and the finished product here so that if there ever were to be a claim of contamination, we could test the raw product, we could test the finished product, see if there's a difference, days later. And then if there is, because I know where in the field it came from, then I can trace back to any inputs. But so back to your question about compost, we also test the compost for the same stuff. So after we're finished, I like to call it cooking. There's standards for turning your compost, adding water, and making sure it heats up to a certain temperature and then keeping it covered. So after all that, and right before application, we test it again to find out if it's got, not only are we testing it for pH and salinity and all of the good parts that compost give to you, we're also testing it for any possible contamination before we put it down. And then if we're buying any compost, it also will always come. And if they don't offer it for you, you should not buy it, but it should always come with the same lab reports that show that it is food safe. Does that answer it?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. Is there anything else you wanted to like touch on or anything specific you wanted to show us?
So I was intending to walk you around, but you're on my laptop and I will lose my connection. I just realized. if I walk you up. But, you know, I just want to talk about a couple of things. Like when you go into any of our food safe areas on the farm, so that's any of our coolers or our processing rooms or into any part of what we call the concrete jungle back there, which is the washdown area. And we have at all the entrances, we have something called footbaths, and they are about 1.5 inches deep. Can you see my fingers? About 1.5 inches deep. Big rubber mats that have high sides, and we put quaternary in it with water. And so we change it a couple of times a day. And you have to walk through that every time you go in there, no matter who you are, or where you are, or whatever. You have to walk through that to decontaminate your feet every single time. And then we also use the same product in a power washer, and we power wash all of our reusable totes after every use. And then we store them back inside so that we're not doing any cross contamination from one product to another. So those are just a couple of the things that we do. You know, if you were to go to some bigger farms and we're going to walk in their fields or whatever, they're going to make you wear booties and cover your hair, you know, put hair nets on. And it, you know, there are different standards for different products that you grow and what the intended use is of them. I mean, if anything is going to be sold as ready to eat, then it's going to have a much higher protocol for food safety, such as sprouts or anything that's going to be juiced, raw, things like that. You know, if it's going to be cooked spinach that's going to get frozen, who knows? I mean, I've never actually done that, but I can imagine that because it's cooked and packaged, it's a little different. But if it's going to be like fresh spinach in a bag, you better believe it's going to go through as many tests as you can imagine. And that's everybody wants to blame the farm if there's a problem, but in reality, the farm gets stuck holding the bag on that, I'm going to say, even though it could have come from somewhere else. I mean, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And once you put it on a truck and it leaves your farm, you really don't have anything to say about what happens to it. So that's that. But, you know, but talk to people. That's what I really always encourage anybody who's beginning farmers, talk to people, because most of us farmers, we want to help out new farmers. And so we're going to say, yeah, hey, do it this way, or I have done it and this didn't work, but this is much better, or talk to this person, they've got a great system, or, you know, we're all willing to share with you, I think. It's important for farming to survive, to be able to create a good network.
Another question, how does GAP Plus work if one producer in the group has a food safety issue? Is the whole group penalized?
No, because it's actually, no. So if it's one farm that's got the issue, I mean, you're still your individual farm, even if you're part of a co-op or the harmonized GAP is it, I mean, you're still your individual farm. So I have never ever heard of anybody being, now that I said that, there probably has been, but I mean, the way I've never come across anything like that. But it's still your farm. And basically for our purposes, harmonized here is that we are individually recognized as a farm, and so is everybody else. We're just doing it in conjunction with other farms so that we all can get certified and not have to pay the highest cost possible.
Thank you. When it comes to like any water contamination in the field, or when it comes to water contamination in that goes into the fields,
Mhm.
is it kind of the same process that it was with any like animal feces? Is just all of what was in that field has to kind of get cut, or how do you manage that?
Um, we're very careful about what water comes into our fields. And so I've never actually had to deal with anything like that. And we don't like I know where my mom lives, in New England, like a lot of people irrigate out of rivers and ponds and stuff. And so they've had to have water mitigation issues. Um, and a lot of times they'll treat the water, they'll add some sort of treatment to the water to kill any microbial growth that might be in it before it actually hits anything. If you're talking about a flood or something, I live in the desert. I don't really know. But I would imagine, yeah, you're gonna lose a lot of product. But if your crops get flooded like that, you're a lot of times you're gonna have to start over anyway. But yeah, I would imagine that there's quite a bit of testing that you'll have to do to make sure that you are safe. So make friends with a really good lab.
Awesome, thank you. I think that is all the questions I have at the moment. Is there any other like tips or kind of like information that you've learned along the way when it comes to food safety and how you've
Um,
kind of managed changing things up?
yeah. So I try to change up because a lot of my workers are Spanish speaking H2A workers, and I don't speak Spanish very well or at all in most cases. Um, I will often do rotate every 6 months where their training is coming from. So, like this year, I used the University of Pennsylvania. A couple of years ago, I used, I think Cornell universities, but you can go online and find the videos through YouTube or whatever and sit down and have them watch them. Sometimes I'll hire a translator to come in and go through specifics that are for our farm. And so I think that's important. It's also important to have everybody well trained in how to clean their tools. So whether it's a wash tank or a knife or a truck or, in our case, tractors, like all of that matters. Like my tractors can't be leaking any fuel or oil or hydraulics or anything like that. So keeping on top, having even your maintenance guys be aware of what food safety is. Everybody should know. Everybody should know. Um, your neighbors should know. You should post it. And so I think that that's really important, is to be as clear as possible with everything that comes down, like if you didn't have time to sanitize everything yesterday, you have to do it before you begin this morning. Like there's no, but I didn't have time. We just don't do that. Um, so that's important to me. I don't test everybody, like I don't give everybody a test or a quiz at the end of it. But I think by being a manager and being aware um and not cutting the corners ourselves, that really helps. That everybody out there is like, well, it's serious, so we have to do it for us anyway. Um, you know, make sure that your food safety program is truly grounded in what your real operations are. And don't make it more difficult than it needs to be, but also don't make it too simple. And so, but lean on your resources. Lean on your resources. And then, check your coolers, check everything, and check your, read your manuals every couple of, every few months and see if it still is the way that you're doing things, because we change as farmers, we change things in the field and then we forget sometimes to like make that change in an SOP or something. So I think that's that's really important, and that's really helpful for auditors to see that you've made revisions and that you're keeping up and that you're taking this seriously. So, you know, just like the government makes all those, puts the date of the last revision on all their forms, you should do that too, so that you can say, hey, you know what, we're not going to use that sanitizer on our knives anymore. Now we're using this one. And instead of dipping them, we can spray them, or instead of spraying them, we're going to dip them, or, we're doing it at this time instead now, or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different things that change. It always changes. So, just make time to go through and check it all out every few months and and make that change, even if it's a handwritten change. Just show that you're paying attention. That's really important. So, does that make sense?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. But, you want this to be the truest, most accurate view of your farm that you can be. I mean, you could get fancy and you could embed QR codes onto your, bins and everything and scan them. I'm not going to do that. That seems like way more effort. I know a lot of farms, bigger farms, do that, and that it's very doable at our scale, but my system works for me right now. Maybe next year or 2 years from now, if we were to scale up again and do bigger production, we don't have land for bigger production, but just say we did. And I hired somebody who all they did was food safety management, which a lot of farms have. Yeah, you know what? That might be a really great thing. That might be a really fantastic tool. But at this point, I don't need that, and I'm not going to do it. So,
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think that is all the questions that we have. Do you have any like last notes or sayings, tips, tidbits?
no, if anybody wants to reach out, here I am, Sarah at blueskyorganicfarms.com. You can email me anytime.
Perfect. Do you have a website where people can come kind of see what you have that has your farm
Blue,
store address on it?
yeah, Blue Sky Organic Farms and .com. You can find us at the downtown Phoenix Market or the Gilbert Market on Saturdays. And we have a store here. We have CSAs all over the valley. But if it's any like operational questions or anything like that, shoot me an email. And I'll be happy to help anybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us and answer any questions that we have. We'll be sure she's a great resource for anyone out there that has any additional questions after this. So we really appreciate working with Sarah.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.